pre-existing friendly societies and mutual insurers out there who have all the regulatory permissions and the framework ready in order to move ahead with minimal regulatory and infrastructure setup. I think there's also something going for mutuality in terms of its ethical appeal and responsible finance. That's not only from a faith-based perspective, but also there is an appetite amongst younger people nowadays, among what we refer to as Generation X and Generation Y, for an ethical basis for their investments and the protection that they seek through insurance. And it also has synergies with the need for green finance. An earlier speaker mentioned in the keynote address, mentioned the Lord Mayor's promotion of the City of London as a centre for Islamic finance, and his visit to Malaysia. Another thing that the City of London Corporation is promoting very, very, very hard, and City UK with it, is something called the Green Finance Initiative, which is all about finding a sustainable way of providing insurance products, etc., against the threat of climate change and global warming. And I'm very pleased that this conference is morphing into a responsible finance conference later this week. But the big practical point about mutuals is to do with their capital. Mutuals have been in existence, many of them, for generations, some for several centuries, and over that time have built up a capital base from profits which have been retained over the years. And it's quite common for a life office in the UK to have a free asset ratio of 20% or more, even before the Solvency II regime came in to make that a more structured requirement. And mutuals, even under Solvency II, have a reputation for being strongly capitalised. That is a strength, but it's also a potential weakness in terms of mutual capital, because if things do go wrong, and if there is a drain on a mutual's capital, then they don't have the ready access that a proprietary company has to the equity markets to raise more capital. And that was very much the reason why 10 years or so ago Standard Life demutualized, and it was also a big factor in the demise of another mutual, Equitable Life, 20 odd years ago, which unusually had a very thin free asset ratio of only about less than 10% compared with over 20% throughout the market. In order to address that, the mutual movement in the UK did sponsor an Act of Parliament which was passed in 2015, 4 years ago now, called the Mutual Deferred Shares Act, giving mutuals access to the equity markets. Unfortunately, that was a piece of enabling legislation that required further detailed regulations in order to implement it. A draft of those regulations was produced. It wasn't really terribly satisfactory, and problems over the tax treatment of capital raised in this way began to emerge, with the result that last autumn the Treasury, which is preoccupied obviously with planning for Brexit as amongst other things, decided to cease work on the regulations to implement the Mutual Deferred Shares Act. Nevertheless, it does remain on the statute book, and I think that is an area, particularly if we want to attract in finance in order to launch a Takaful-like Sharia-compliant product within a mutual. That is an area that does need further work. And to be frank with you, there is another issue for mutuals, apart from the vulnerability of their capital base, and that is one over governance. Because they operate on a system of one member, one vote, it means that the shareholder, or the member shareholder equivalent power base is very diffuse, which makes it difficult for members to hold the management of a mutual insurer properly to account. I mentioned a few minutes ago Equitable Life, and the downfall of Equitable Life, I think, was largely due to that issue of governance. It had a very strong, domineering even, chief executive. It had generally weak non-executives. The company issued guarantees for certain products. Because of changes in the economic environment, those guarantees were called. They hadn't reserved properly against them, and they tried to deal with the solvency crisis that emerged by reducing benefits. They were taken to court over that, and after a series of hearings at first instance in the Court of Appeal and finally in the House of Lords, they lost, put the company up for sale, and found that nobody wanted to buy it. So that was a salutary lesson. From it came a number of inquiries. The main inquiry led by Lord Penrose reported some 800 pages of investigation into the backgrounds of Equitable Life. That led to a further review by Lord Miners into the governance of life offices generally, and a recommendation of a code of corporate governance, which now all mutual life insurers do adhere to, and that has addressed many of these issues. So to summarise and go back to the theme of the empathy between mutuals and Takaful and the analogy of marriage, I think there is a very strong interest from the mutual side in becoming a marriage partner, or at least of being very good friends with the Sharia compliant sector. There is strong empathy between them. I think this idea of ethical, responsible finance is likely to be a way forward, and I hope a basis for a fruitful and lasting marriage. So, thank you. Yes, by all means.
I think time is short, but we'll take one or two questions. One or two observations, questions. Yes, gentlemen.
The question I had was maybe the utilization of collaborative or even decentralized technologies like blockchain, would they be able to overcome the governance difficulties that you highlight?
Is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that blockchain in itself is an answer to those governance issues. I think the answer to the governance issues is partly through, as I mentioned, the corporate governance code, partly through Solvency II as well. And Solvency II has 3 pillars, one of which is proper governance, and the UK regulators, the PRA in particular, are very hot on ensuring that that mutual insurers do have good governance arrangements in place. Blockchain is an incredibly exciting future development, but I think that's a slightly separate issue from one of governance.
Okay. Any other question? Yes, Iqbal.
John, thank you very much. Any particular avenues we can use to get this bill properly enacted? I know that the government, the Treasury is busy at the moment, but, in a few months, any particular touch points or influences we can use to get it on? Because I think that's the best route into the market there.
I completely agree that it is a very clear route that we should be following. It unfortunately got caught up with some issues over Solvency II, over the need to make the regulations compatible with the own funds requirements under Solvency II, which is not necessarily a requirement for the way forward if it's going to be a means of getting capital in to run Takaful. As you've indicated, the government has other things on its mind at the moment, but I think once Brexit is sorted, if ever it is, then the way forward is through lobbying of MPs. The bill was a private member's bill initially. It got all-party support. It got government support. So there is a strong tide running in its favour. Once we can concentrate on it, then I think that's the avenue to follow again.
Okay, I guess with this we come to the end of this session before coffee break. I'll just quickly summarize it within 1 minute. All the features between Takaful and mutuals are out there, explained by John. Simplicity of the proposition, the ethical appeal, the governance is a bit of a challenge, and certainly where we are, the stumbling block right now is the whole issue of capital and the bill that's out there at the Treasury. As we say, as you move towards marriage, you need the marriage vows, and this is where we're stuck, and you need parental blessing in our marriages. So I guess we would wait for that parental blessing to come, hopefully after Brexit is sorted. With that, thank you very much, and time for coffee.